My name is Helen Richardson, and the moment that changed everything began with the antiseptic smell of Dr. Marcus Sullivan's office on that gray November Tuesday. I was 73 years old, and I had been visiting this same medical office on Elmwood Avenue in Richmond Heights for 22 years. The familiar routine of autumn checkups, the sound of leaves crunching under my feet as I walked from the parking lot, the warmth of the waiting room with its faded magazines, all of it should have been comforting. Instead, something felt terribly wrong. Dr. Sullivan's hands were trembling as he wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm. In all our years together, through my husband Robert's final illness, through my own minor health scares, through decades of routine appointments, I had never seen his steady surgeon's hands shake like this. His eyes, usually warm and direct, kept darting to the door, as if he expected someone to burst in at any moment. "Your numbers are excellent, Helen," he said, but his voice carried a strain that made my chest tighten with inexplicable dread. "Heart rate perfect, blood pressure of a woman half your age. Your lab results show you're in remarkable health for 73. He paused, removing his stethoscope with fumbling fingers. "You have many, many good years ahead of you." But as he spoke these reassuring words, something in his expression told a completely different story. The lines around his eyes had deepened with worry, and he kept glancing at his desk, where a small piece of paper lay folded beside his prescription pad. As I gathered my purse to leave my mind spinning with confusion about his strange behavior, Dr. Sullivan suddenly moved behind me. I felt him slip something small and carefully folded deep into the side pocket of my leather handbag, the same handbag Robert had given me for our 40th wedding anniversary. The movement was so subtle, so practiced, that anyone watching might have thought he was simply helping me with my coat. My heart began to race a thundering rhythm that seemed to echo in my ears. In all our years of doctor-patient relationship, he had never done anything remotely like this. My mind immediately flew to Robert, to the way he used to slip me love notes in my purse when we were young. But this felt different, urgent, frightening. "Take care of yourself, Helen," Dr. Sullivan said, and for the first time in over 2 decades, he used my first name. His voice was barely above a whisper. "And remember, family isn't always what it seems. Sometimes the people we trust most—" He trailed off, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my stomach lurch with fear. "Just be very, very careful." As those words hung in the antiseptic air, a flood of memories crashed over me. Robert, during his final weeks, gripping my hand with surprising strength and whispering, "Helen, promise me you'll be careful with the money after I'm gone. Don't let anyone, not even family, pressure you into anything. People change when large sums are involved." I had dismissed his concerns then, thinking it was just the morphine making him paranoid. But now, Dr. Sullivan's warning brought those words rushing back with terrifying clarity. I left his office with my entire body trembling, not from age or cold, but from a fear I couldn't yet name. The autumn wind whipped through the maple trees lining Elmwood Avenue, sending golden leaves swirling around my feet as I walked to my car. Richmond Heights had never looked more beautiful, the colonial houses with their perfectly manicured lawns, the boutique shops with their warm yellow windows, but I felt as if I were seeing it all through a veil of approaching danger. During the 20-minute drive home to Maple Grove Drive, I kept reaching into my purse, feeling the small piece of paper, but not daring to read it yet. The familiar streets of our tree-lined neighborhood blurred past my window as 1,000 questions raced through my mind. Why had Dr. Sullivan seemed so nervous? What could possibly be so important that he'd risk slipping me a secret note? And most frighteningly, what did he mean when he warned me that family isn't always what it seems? The memories kept coming in waves. Over the past few months, I had noticed small, strange things that I had dismissed at the time. Thomas asking casual questions about my investment accounts. Caroline wondering aloud about the value of the house. Emma mentioning how expensive her college applications were, then looking at me expectantly. Little comments about retirement homes they'd seen advertised about how nice it would be for elderly people to have professional care. At the time, I had thought they were just making conversation. Now, with Dr. Sullivan's warning echoing in my mind, those innocent comments took on a sinister new meaning. When I pulled into the driveway of our large colonial house, the house where Robert and I had raised Thomas from the age of 3, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where we had built what I thought was a loving family, I found them all gathered in the living room in a way that immediately struck me as wrong. Thomas was there with his wife Caroline and their daughter Emma, all 3 seated unusually close together on the burgundy sofa that Robert and I had chosen together 30 years ago. Their heads were bent over several official-looking documents that Caroline quickly shuffled behind her back when she saw me. The coffee table was covered with papers I didn't recognize, and Emma was holding what looked like a manila folder. "How was your appointment, Mom?" Thomas asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The question seemed rehearsed, too casual, as if he had been practicing it. I had raised this boy from the age of 3, when he was just a frightened, abandoned child whose birth parents had left him at a social services office with nothing but a note saying they couldn't care for him anymore. I knew every nuance of his voice, every tell when he was hiding something. The way he was looking at me now with that forced casualness made my skin crawl with recognition. This was the same expression he'd worn at age 8 when he'd broken my favorite vase and tried to blame it on the cat. "Everything's fine, dear," I replied, studying their faces carefully as I hung my coat in the hall closet. "Dr. Sullivan says I'm in perfect health. Strong heart, clear mind, many good years ahead." I watched for their reactions, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Caroline's face flickered with what could only be described as disappointment. It was subtle, just a momentary tightening around her eyes, but unmistakable. Emma, my precious granddaughter, whom I'd helped raise since birth, actually frowned a quick, involuntary expression of frustration before she caught herself and forced a smile. "And Thomas?" Thomas looked almost angry. His jaw tightened, and I saw his hands clench briefly before he forced them to relax. That's wonderful, Grandma," Emma said, but her voice sounded hollow, rehearsed. "It means you'll have plenty of time to enjoy your retirement." The way she emphasized "enjoy your retirement" sent chills down my spine, especially when I remembered Robert's warnings about people changing when money was involved. More memories surfaced as I stood there, watching my family's forced smiles. Just last month, Caroline had asked me if I had updated my will recently. 2 weeks ago, Thomas had mentioned that his friend's mother was so much happier in assisted living, and Emma had been asking pointed questions about my finances disguised as concern about my retirement security. At the time, I had been touched by what I thought was their caring concern for my future. Now I realized they hadn't been worried about my security at all. They had been planning how to get their hands on it. That evening, the atmosphere at dinner was so thick with tension, you could cut it with a knife. We sat around the mahogany dining table, where we had shared thousands of meals, but tonight felt different. Conversations died the moment I entered the room. Phones were quickly put away when I approached, and most disturbing of all, they kept exchanging these meaningful looks, the kind of looks that said they all knew something I didn't. "Is something wrong?" I finally asked, setting down my fork and looking directly at each of them in turn. "No, Mom, everything's fine," Thomas replied quickly, too quickly. "We're just tired. It's been a long day." But Caroline wouldn't meet my eyes, and Emma was pushing her food around her plate without eating. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Emma suddenly asked, "Grandma, have you thought about what you want to do with the house when you know, when you're older and can't take care of it anymore?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Emma, I'm perfectly capable of taking care of my own house," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why would you ask such a thing?" "Oh, I just meant, someday, everyone has to think about these things eventually." but her eyes were bright with something that looked disturbingly like anticipation. That night alone in my bedroom with the door locked, I finally unfolded Dr. Sullivan's note with trembling fingers. The bedroom that Robert and I had shared for so many years suddenly felt cold and unsafe as I read words that made my world collapse. Helen, your family came to see me yesterday without your knowledge. Caroline asked me to falsify medical records showing you have dementia. She wanted documentation to support immediate institutionalization. Thomas specifically asked about your life expectancy and mentioned your substantial assets 3 times. Emma was taking notes on everything I said. They want you declared incompetent so they can gain control of your finances. When I refused to cooperate, Caroline threatened to report me for enabling an incompetent patient, and Thomas mentioned finding a more cooperative physician. They're planning something terrible. You are in immediate danger. Don't trust them. Don't stay in that house. Find help immediately. Dr. Sullivan. I read the note 3 times, each word hitting me like a physical blow. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the paper. My own family, the son I had sacrificed everything for, the daughter-in-law I had welcomed like my own child, the granddaughter who was supposed to be my legacy. They were planning to have me declared insane, to steal everything I had worked for. But as the initial shock wore off, Robert's final words came flooding back with new significance. He hadn't been paranoid from medication, he had been trying to protect me. And suddenly, I understood why he had been so secretive about our finances in his final years, why he had insisted on certain investments being kept private, why he had made me promise to be careful with money after he was gone. What my family didn't know, what they had never bothered to discover in all their scheming, was that Robert had left me far more than they imagined. Hidden in carefully structured offshore accounts and international investments that I had never mentioned to anyone, we had accumulated nearly $3 million in assets. Robert had been far more successful in his business ventures than we had ever let on, and we had quietly built a fortune that could have supported multiple families in luxury. Robert had structured these accounts specifically to protect me from exactly this kind of situation. Helen, he had told me during one of our last conversations, if anything ever happens to make you feel unsafe or threatened even by family, you have the resources to protect yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel helpless or dependent. At the time, I had thought he was just being overly cautious. Now I realized he had been giving me the tools to save my own life. Sleep was impossible that night. Every creak of the house, every footstep in the hallway made me jump. The house that had been my sanctuary for 47 years now felt like a trap. At 2 a.m, I heard voices drifting up from the kitchen below. Moving as quietly as my 73-year-old joints would allow, I crept to the top of the stairs and listened to a conversation that would haunt me forever. The old bitch's doctor won't cooperate. Caroline's voice carried clearly through the silence. The venom in her words hit me like a slap. This was the woman who had called me Mom for 15 years, who had cried in my arms when she had miscarriages, who had asked me to help her choose her wedding dress. We'll find another doctor, Thomas replied coldly. Dr. Peterson over on Oak Street has a reputation for being flexible with his assessments, especially if the family is concerned about a patient's well-being. But what do we do with her in the meantime? Emma's voice, my granddaughter, the child I had sung to sleep, whose tears I had dried, whose dreams I had encouraged. I need access to her money now, Emma continued, and the casual greed in her voice made me grab the banister to keep from falling. I've already been accepted to Stanford. The tuition deposit alone is $50,000, and that's due next month. I can't wait for her to die naturally. She could live another 10 years. The casual cruelty in her words about my death made me feel physically sick. This child I had loved unconditionally was talking about my death as if it were just an inconvenience delaying her plans. Look! Caroline continued, her voice growing more animated. The house alone is worth over $800,000. Add her pension, her savings accounts, and whatever investments she's got hidden away, and we're talking about serious money. Money that's just sitting there while we struggle. But they had no idea how much money was actually sitting there. If they thought $800,000 plus some savings was worth committing multiple felonies for, they would be stunned to learn about the real fortune Robert had left me. She's not just sitting on it, Thomas said bitterly. She's spending it. Do you know how much her medications cost, her doctor visits, her groceries? She's burning through our inheritance every single day she stays alive. Our inheritance. The phrase echoed in my mind. Money I had earned through 40 years of teaching money, Robert and I had saved through decades of careful planning and wise investments. They saw it all as theirs already. I've been thinking, Caroline said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. What if we don't wait for a cooperative doctor? What if we just help her become actually incompetent? What do you mean? Emma asked, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. Her medications, Caroline explained. She takes pills for blood pressure, cholesterol, her heart. What if we started switching them around, double some doses, skip others entirely? We could also start hiding her things, moving them around, making her think she's losing her memory. Tell her she had conversations she never had, make her question her own sanity. The evil brilliance of their plan made me feel sick. They weren't just planning to steal from me, they were planning to systematically destroy my mind, to make me doubt my own reality, until I truly did become the incompetent old woman they claimed I already was. That's brilliant, Thomas said, and I could hear the admiration in his voice. We document everything, maybe even video her confused episodes, and in a few months, any court in the country would grant us guardianship. And the best part, Caroline added with a laugh that made my skin crawl, is that she'll never know it was us. She'll think she's actually losing her mind. She'll probably beg us to put her in a nursing home. They laughed. All three of them laughed at the thought of driving me insane, of stealing my dignity along with my money, of making me grateful for my own destruction. But as I stood there in the darkness, clutching Dr. Sullivan's warning, something inside me shifted. The fear began to transform into something else, something harder and more dangerous. They had underestimated the senile old woman. They were about to discover exactly how sharp my mind still was and how much power I actually had. I spent the rest of the night making plans, remembering everything Robert had taught me about protecting myself. By dawn, I had decided on a course of action that would either save me or destroy me completely. There was no middle ground. At 5 a.m, while my family slept peacefully in their beds, dreaming of their future riches, I quietly packed my smallest suitcase with essentials. I moved through the house like a ghost, taking my important documents, my medications, a few changes of clothes, and most importantly, the small leather journal where Robert had recorded all the details of our secret accounts and investments. But I also did something that would prove to be crucial. I set my smartphone to record as I moved through the house. I wanted to capture one more conversation to have absolute proof of their intentions. Pretending I had forgotten something in the kitchen, I walked past their bedroom door, making sure to step on the creaky floorboard that always woke them. Is she up already? I heard Caroline mumble through the door. Probably can't sleep, Thomas replied, his voice clearer now. Guilty conscience, maybe. She knows we're onto her erratic behavior. I've been documenting everything, Caroline said. Yesterday, I wrote down that she asked me the same question 3 times and couldn't remember where she put her reading glasses. Today, I'll write that she was wandering around the house at dawn, looking confused and disoriented. Perfect, Thomas said. In a few weeks, we'll have enough documented incidents to petition for emergency guardianship. Dr. Peterson said he'd be willing to review our documentation and provide the medical certification we need. Once we have guardianship, Caroline continued, everything becomes ours to manage. The house, the bank accounts, the investments, everything. She'll be in a nice, quiet facility where she can live out her remaining years in peace, and will finally be able to live the life we deserve. I had heard enough. With their voices recorded on my phone, providing clear evidence of their conspiracy, I slipped out of the house and into the pre-dawn darkness. Richmond Heights was still asleep, the street lamps casting long shadows through the autumn mist. I had left a note on the kitchen table, gone to run some errands, back later. Helen. I wanted them to think this was just another routine day, but I wasn't just running errands. I was running for my life. The morning air was crisp and sharp as I walked to the corner of Maple Grove and Elmwood, where I knew I could catch the early bus to downtown Richmond Heights. My heart was pounding, not from exertion, but from the terrifying realization that I was now completely on my own. The family I had trusted with my life had become my greatest threat. As the bus carried me through the awakening city, I watched the familiar landmarks pass by the high school where I'd taught for 30 years, the church where Robert and I had been married, the park where I had pushed Thomas on the swings when he was little. It felt like I was leaving my entire life behind, but I knew I was actually fighting to reclaim it. My first stop was First National Bank of Richmond Heights, where I arrived just as they opened their doors. The morning sun was streaming through the tall windows as I approached the customer service desk, where Patricia Wells, the branch manager I had known for decades, greeted me with surprise. Helen. You're here early this morning. Is everything all right? Patricia. I need to ask you a very important question, and I need you to be completely honest with me, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fear churning in my stomach. Has anyone from my family been here asking about my accounts? Her face immediately grew serious, and I saw her glance toward her office. As a matter of fact, yes. Your son Thomas was here last Friday asking about your account balances and whether you had given anyone power of attorney over your finances. When I told him that information was confidential, he became quite persistent. He said you were having some cognitive issues and that the family was concerned about your ability to manage your affairs. My heart sank, but I wasn't surprised. Patricia, I need you to know that I am in perfect mental health. My family is planning to have me declared incompetent so they can steal my money. I have proof. Patricia's eyes widened in shock. Helen, that's a very serious accusation. I have recordings of them planning it, I said, pulling out my phone. As Thomas and Caroline's voices filled the small office describing their plan to drive me insane and steal everything I owned, Patricia's face grew pale with horror. My God, she whispered when the recording ended. Helen, we need to take immediate action to protect your accounts. For the next 2 hours, Patricia and I worked to secure my finances. We changed all my passwords, updated my security questions, and added multiple layers of protection to my accounts. But most importantly, I finally told her about the accounts Robert had kept secret. Patricia, what I'm about to tell you must remain absolutely confidential, I said. I have substantial assets that my family doesn't know about. Accounts and investments that my late husband set up to protect me from exactly this kind of situation. As I provided her with the details of my offshore accounts and international investments, Patricia's eyes grew wider and wider. Helen, you're talking about nearly $3 million in assets. I know, I said. Robert set these up because he was worried about exactly what's happening now. He knew that large sums of money can change people, even family members. Patricia immediately set up additional security protocols for these accounts and promised to contact the authorities if my family tried to access any of my funds or if anything suspicious happened to me. My next stop was the law offices of Bradford Morrison and Associates, the most prestigious legal firm in Richmond Heights. The building was a converted Victorian mansion on Oak Street, and as I climbed the steps to the front door, I felt like I was walking into battle. I had called ahead and requested an emergency consultation with their senior partner, Attorney Victoria Bradford. When I mentioned the amount of money I was willing to pay for immediate legal protection, she agreed to see me right away. Victoria Bradford was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. Her office was lined with law books and filled with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent decades winning difficult cases. She listened intently as I explained my situation and played the recordings I had made. "Mrs. Richardson," she said when I finished, "what your family is planning constitutes elder abuse, financial fraud, conspiracy, and potentially criminal assault if they tamper with your medications. We can file for a restraining order immediately and have criminal charges brought against them." "I want more than that," I told her, remembering Robert's advice about being strong when threatened. "I want them to expose themselves completely. I want them to commit to their plans so thoroughly that there's no way they can claim innocence when they're caught." Victoria smiled a sharp, predatory smile that told me I'd found the right lawyer. "Mrs. Richardson, I think we're going to work very well together. I'm going to assign my best investigator to your case, and we're going to let your family dig their own graves." The investigator Victoria assigned to my case was David Chen, a former FBI agent in his 40s, with the kind of quiet intensity that made you feel immediately safe and confident. When we met in Victoria's office that afternoon, he explained exactly how we would proceed. "Mrs. Richardson," he said, "the first thing we need to do is document everything your family has already done. Based on what you've told us, I suspect they've been planning this for months, maybe longer. We need to find out exactly how far this conspiracy goes." Within 24 hours, David had uncovered a trail of deception that shocked even me. Thomas had lost his job 6 months earlier due to gambling debts, something he had hidden from me completely. He had been playing online poker and betting on sports, accumulating tens of thousands of dollars in debt that he had been paying off with money he borrowed from me under false pretenses. Caroline had opened 3 credit cards in my name over the past 4 months, racking up over $60,000 in debt on luxury purchases, expensive dinners, and even a week-long vacation to the Bahamas that she had told me was a work conference. The investigator had receipts showing purchases at high-end boutiques, 5-star restaurants, and luxury hotels, all charged to credit cards I had never authorized. But Emma's betrayal cut the deepest. My sweet granddaughter had been running a sophisticated online fraud for months. She had created a crowdfunding campaign called "Help My Grandmother Fight Alzheimer's," complete with a photo of me that she had taken while I was napping, making me look frail and confused. The campaign description was heartbreaking: a loving granddaughter trying to raise money for her grandmother's medical care and assisted living expenses. She had raised over $22,000 from sympathetic donors' money she had used to pay for her college application fees, a new car, and a spring break trip to Europe with her friends. The cruelest part was the updates she posted describing my supposed decline and thanking donors for their compassion for families dealing with dementia. "There's more," David told me during our second meeting. "They've already made contact with a document forger named Marcus Webb. He specializes in creating fake medical records and forging doctors' signatures. Your family paid him $8,000 as a down payment to create a complete medical history showing your progressive mental decline over the past 2 years." I felt sick. They hadn't just planned to steal from me, they had already been executing their plan for months, systematically destroying my reputation and my financial security, while I remained completely unaware. "How much time do we have?" I asked. "Not much," Victoria replied. "David's sources indicate they're planning to file for emergency guardianship next week. Once they have those fraudulent medical documents, they'll move quickly to have you committed and gain control of your assets." "Then we need to move faster," I said, thinking of Robert's advice about taking action when threatened. "What's our next step?" Victoria and David exchanged a look. "Mrs. Richardson, what we're about to propose is risky, but it could completely destroy their plans and provide evidence for criminal prosecution. Are you prepared to fight back?" I thought about Thomas as a little boy crying in my arms after nightmares about the parents who had abandoned him. I thought about Caroline on her wedding day, thanking me for being the mother she had never had. I thought about Emma taking her first steps toward me, her tiny arms outstretched with complete trust. Then I thought about their laughter as they planned to drive me insane. I thought about the casual way they discussed my death as an inconvenience, I thought about the fake crowdfunding campaign that portrayed me as a helpless victim while stealing money from kind strangers. "Yes," I said, firmly channeling Robert's strength. "I'm ready to fight back." The plan Victoria and David devised was both elegant and dangerous. Instead of confronting my family directly, we would create opportunities for them to incriminate themselves while being recorded and monitored. We would let them believe their plan was working while actually documenting every crime they committed. But first, they needed to fit me with recording equipment that would capture everything without being detected. David took me to a specialist who provided me with devices so small and sophisticated that even if my family searched me, they would never find them. A tiny microphone was sewn into the lining of my favorite coat. A recording device no bigger than a button was attached to my necklace, and a GPS tracker was hidden in my shoes so David would always know where I was. "Mrs. Richardson," David explained, "the next few days are going to be dangerous. Your family is going to escalate their plan when they realize you're not as helpless as they thought. They might try to physically force you to sign documents or even try to have you committed against your will. Are you sure you're ready for this?" I wasn't sure of anything, except that I had no choice. "David, these people were planning to torture me psychologically until I lost my sanity. They were going to steal everything Robert and I worked for and then warehouse me in some facility to die alone and forgotten. What could be more dangerous than that?" Phase 1 of our plan began when I returned home that evening. I had been gone for 2 days, and I knew my family would be frantic with worry not about my well-being, but about their loss of control over me. As I walked up the front steps of our house, I could see them through the living room window, all 3 of them pacing and talking animatedly. The moment I opened the front door, they surrounded me with a combination of false relief and barely controlled anger. "Mom, where have you been?" Thomas demanded, his voice tight with strain. "We've been worried sick. We called the police, the hospitals. I told you I was running errands." I replied calmly, hanging my coat in the hall closet while the hidden microphone recorded every word. "I'm perfectly fine." "Errands for 2 days." Caroline's voice was sharp with suspicion. "What kind of errands take 2 days?" "Personal business," I said, studying their faces. They looked haggard, sleep-deprived, desperate. "Good. Let them worry." "Grandma," Emma said, and her voice was different now, less sweet, more calculating. "We need to talk. We've been doing some research, and we think you might need some help. Managing things, making decisions." This was it. They were accelerating their timeline because my disappearance had scared them. "Perfect. What kind of help?" I asked innocently. Thomas sat down across from me, his expression serious and concerned, the same expression he had worn as a child when he was about to lie about breaking something. "Mom, we've noticed some changes in your behavior lately. Forgetfulness, confusion, wandering off without telling anyone where you're going." Each word was being recorded by multiple devices, providing clear evidence of their psychological manipulation. "We think it might be time to consider some additional support," Caroline added. "Maybe someone to help you with daily tasks, managing your medications, keeping track of your appointments." "You mean like a nurse?" I asked. "Well, maybe more than that," Emma said carefully. "There are some really nice facilities that specialize in caring for people who are experiencing cognitive changes. Places where you could have professional help 24 hours a day." They were actually doing it, trying to convince me to commit myself voluntarily. The recording devices were capturing every word of their manipulation. "But I feel fine," I said, playing my part perfectly. "Dr. Sullivan said I was in excellent health." "Mom," Thomas said, his voice taking on a patient, condescending tone that made my skin crawl. "Sometimes people with cognitive issues don't realize they're having problems. That's part of the condition." "What cognitive issues?" I asked, genuinely curious to hear how they would spin their fictional narrative. Caroline pulled out a notebook, the same notebook I had seen her with when I returned from my doctor's appointment. "Helen, we've been keeping track of some concerning incidents. Last week you asked me the same question 3 times in one afternoon. You've been misplacing things more frequently. And yesterday morning, we found you wandering around the house at 5 a.m. looking confused. Every single item in her list was either a complete fabrication or a grossly distorted version of normal behavior. But they were presenting it as evidence of my mental decline recorded now for law enforcement to hear. I don't remember any of that, I said truthfully. That's exactly what we mean, Thomas said triumphantly. The memory issues are getting worse. We think you need professional evaluation. What kind of evaluation? We've already made an appointment for you, Emma said, and the eagerness in her voice was unmistakable. Tomorrow morning with Dr. Peterson. He specializes in age-related cognitive issues. Dr. Peterson, the flexible doctor they had mentioned in their late-night conversation. Everything was proceeding exactly as Victoria and David had predicted. Do I have to go? I asked, continuing to play the confused elderly woman they wanted me to be. Mom? Thomas said gently, It's for your own good. We love you, and we want to make sure you get the help you need. The word love coming from his mouth after everything I had heard made me feel physically sick. But I forced myself to nod and agree to the appointment. That night, I called Victoria on the secure phone David had given me. They're moving faster than we expected, I told her. They've made an appointment with Dr. Peterson for tomorrow morning. Perfect, Victoria said. David has already contacted Dr. Peterson's office. It turns out he's been under investigation by the State Medical Board for falsifying mental health evaluations. When your family approached him, he immediately contacted the authorities. Tomorrow's appointment is going to be very interesting. The next morning as we drove to Dr. Peterson's office in Thomas's car, I listened to my family coach each other on what to tell the doctor. They had clearly rehearsed their stories, coordinating their accounts of my supposed mental decline. Remember, Caroline whispered to Thomas. Mention the wandering at night, the repetitive questions, and the time she forgot where she lived. I had never forgotten where I lived, but that detail would be added to their fictional narrative of my incompetence. Dr. Peterson's office was in a rundown medical building on the outskirts of town, very different from Dr. Sullivan's professional practice in the heart of Richmond Heights. As we sat in the dingy waiting room, I noticed 2 men in suits sitting nearby reading magazines, but clearly paying attention to us. David's people, most likely. When Dr. Peterson called us into his office, I immediately understood why he was under investigation. His office was disheveled, his credentials were displayed in cheap frames, and he had the shifty, nervous demeanor of someone who was constantly looking over his shoulder. So, he said, barely looking at me while addressing my family. I understand Mrs. Richardson has been experiencing some cognitive difficulties. Yes, Thomas said eagerly. She's been showing signs of confusion, memory loss, disorientation. As my family recited their rehearsed list of fabricated symptoms, Dr. Peterson nodded and took notes without asking me a single question about my own experience or feelings. It was clear he had no intention of conducting a legitimate evaluation. Based on what you've told me, Dr. Peterson said after less than 10 minutes, I think we can definitely say that Mrs. Richardson would benefit from supervised care. I can prepare documentation supporting that recommendation. How quickly can you have the paperwork ready? Caroline asked. I can have something for you by this afternoon, Dr. Peterson replied. The standard forms for cognitive impairment and recommendations for supervised living arrangements. This was it. They were literally purchasing a fake medical evaluation. The recording devices were capturing every word of this fraudulent transaction. But then something unexpected happened. Dr. Peterson's secretary knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. Doctor, there are some people here to see you. They say it's urgent. 2 FBI agents entered the office, badges displayed prominently. Dr. Peterson, you're under arrest for medical fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Mrs. Richardson, you're safe now. The look on my family's faces was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty I had endured. Thomas went completely pale. Caroline's mouth fell open in shock, and Emma actually tried to run only to find 2 more agents blocking the door. What's happening? Thomas stammered. One of the FBI agents, a woman in her 40s with kind but determined eyes looked directly at me. "Mrs. Richardson, we've been investigating Dr. Peterson for months as part of a larger elder abuse investigation. When your attorney contacted us about your situation, we realized your family was walking directly into our ongoing operation." "You mean," I began. "We mean, your family has been under surveillance for the past week. We have recordings of them planning to drive you insane, evidence of the credit card fraud, documentation of the fake crowdfunding campaign, and now video evidence of them attempting to purchase fraudulent medical evaluations." As the agents began reading my family their rights, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and profound sadness. These were people I had loved for decades, people I had sacrificed everything for, and they had repaid that love with betrayal and greed. But the ordeal wasn't over yet. As we left Dr. Peterson's office with my family in custody, and me finally free from their control, Thomas made one last desperate attempt to manipulate me. "Mom," he called out as the agents led him to their car. "You can't do this to your own family. We love you. Everything we did was because we love you." I stopped walking and looked at him, really looked at him. This man I had raised from a frightened 3-year-old, this person who had been my whole world for 40 years. "Thomas," I said quietly, "love doesn't involve stealing, lying, or planning to drive someone insane. What you felt for me wasn't love, it was greed disguised as affection." The legal proceedings that followed were swift and decisive. The evidence against my family was overwhelming: audio recordings, video footage, financial documents, witness testimony, and their own admissions of guilt. Victoria Bradford had assembled a case so ironclad that the prosecutor called it one of the clearest examples of elder abuse she had ever seen. The trial took place in November, 6 months after Dr. Sullivan had slipped me that life-saving note. I sat in the witness box, looking out at a courtroom filled with reporters, other victims of elder abuse, and members of the legal community who had come to see justice served. When the prosecutor asked me to explain how the conspiracy had affected me, I looked directly at my family sitting at the defendant's table. "I want you all to know," I said clearly, "that despite everything you've done, I don't hate you. I'm disappointed beyond words. I'm heartbroken. But I don't hate you. What I hate is what you became. What I hate is that 3 people I loved more than my own life could look at me and see nothing but a bank account waiting to be emptied." Thomas was staring at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. Caroline was crying, but they looked like tears of self-pity rather than genuine remorse. Only Emma looked directly at me, and in her eyes I saw something that might have been real regret. "I devoted 47 years of my life to building a family," I continued. "I sacrificed my career, my social life, my personal dreams to make sure you had everything you needed. I didn't expect gratitude for the rest of my life, but I also didn't expect you to repay that love with betrayal and systematic psychological torture." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Thomas was sentenced to 10 years in prison for conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, identity theft, and attempted forgery. Caroline received 8 years for the same charges, plus the credit card fraud. Emma, due to her age and willingness to cooperate with the prosecution, received 5 years of probation and 2,000 hours of community service, specifically working with elderly victims of abuse. But the real victory wasn't in their sentences, it was in my freedom. For the first time in decades, I was truly free to live my own life, to make my own choices, to spend my own money as I saw fit. I used that freedom wisely. First, I bought a beautiful house on the banks of the Riverside District, not too large but elegant and comfortable, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the James River, and a garden where I could grow the roses I had always loved but never had time for. The house had a library with built-in bookshelves and a reading nook where I could spend hours with the novels I had always meant to read. More importantly, I used my wealth to help others. I established the Richardson Foundation for Elder Protection, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preventing elder abuse and helping victims recover their lives and dignity. We provided legal assistance counseling services and emergency housing for elderly people whose families had betrayed them. The foundation's offices were located in a restored Victorian house on Main Street, and within the first year we had helped over 100 victims of elder abuse. We provided free legal representation, emergency financial assistance, and counseling services. We also worked to change laws making it harder for family members to exploit vulnerable elderly relatives and easier for victims to seek help. I also discovered something wonderful about myself. I was still capable of growth, of change, of new relationships and experiences. I took painting classes at the community center and discovered I had a talent for watercolors. I joined a book club at the public library and made friends who valued me for my mind and my conversation, not my bank account. I traveled to places I had always dreamed of seeing: the art museums of Florence, the gardens of England, the temples of Japan. But perhaps the most unexpected development was with Emma. 8 months after the trial, she came to see me. She had completed her first year of community service working at Riverside Senior Center, and the experience had profoundly changed her. "Grandma," she said, sitting in my new living room with tears in her eyes, "I understand now what I almost did to you. Working with the elderly residents, hearing their stories about family members who abandoned them or stole from them. I realized I was becoming exactly like the people who hurt them." I studied her face carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or false emotion. But what I saw was genuine remorse, real understanding of the magnitude of what she had participated in. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued. "I don't expect you to want me in your life. But I need you to know that I've changed. The community service wasn't punishment for me, it was education. It taught me what really matters in life." I was quiet for a long time, weighing her words against my memories of her cruelty and greed. Finally, I made a decision that surprised even me. "Emma," I said, "I'm willing to give you a chance to prove that change is real. But it will be on my terms, with my boundaries. And if you ever betray my trust again, it will be the last time." She nodded eagerly, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do anything, Grandma. I just want the chance to show you that I can be the granddaughter you deserved all along." Over the following months, Emma proved herself in small but meaningful ways. She visited regularly, not asking for anything, but simply spending time with me. She helped with the foundation, showing genuine passion for protecting vulnerable elderly people. She enrolled in college part-time, paying her own way with money she earned from her job at the senior center. Most importantly, she began dating a young man named Michael, who worked as a social worker with at-risk children. When she brought him to meet me, I could see that he was someone who valued her character, not her potential inheritance. And when she told me they were engaged and planning a small, modest wedding that they would pay for themselves, I knew her transformation was complete. Thomas and Caroline, on the other hand, never showed real remorse. They wrote letters from prison blaming me for their situation, claiming I had overreacted to their plans and destroyed the family by pressing charges. Thomas insisted that he had only been trying to protect me from making poor financial decisions, while Caroline maintained that I was vindictive and unforgiving. Their letters went unanswered. I had learned that some people are capable of change and growth while others are not. I had also learned to tell the difference. Today, at 76 years old, I can honestly say that I am happier than I have been in decades. My life is full of meaning, purpose, and genuine relationships. I have friends who appreciate my company for who I am, work that makes a real difference in the world, and a granddaughter who has learned the value of integrity and earned her place in my life through her actions, not her birthright. I also have something I never expected to have again: hope for the future. Not just hope that I will be comfortable and safe in my remaining years, but hope that I can continue to grow, to contribute, to make a positive difference in the world. The Richardson Foundation has now helped over 500 elderly victims of abuse in the past 3 years. We've provided legal assistance that resulted in criminal convictions, emergency housing that saved lives, and counseling services that helped people rebuild their sense of self-worth. We've also worked to pass legislation that makes elder abuse a felony in our state and provides better protection for vulnerable seniors. Every time I see one of our clients rebuild their life after betrayal, every time I hear from an elderly person who found the courage to report abuse because of our outreach programs, I know that my experience, as painful as it was, served a greater purpose. I learned that real family isn't determined by blood or legal documents. Real family is built on love, respect, trust, and mutual support. The people who planned to steal my money and destroy my mind were never really my family, despite sharing my name and my history. But Emma, who chose to change her life and earn back my trust through years of consistent actions, is truly my granddaughter now. I also learned that it's never too late to start over, to make new choices, to build a different kind of life. At 73, when my old life was stolen from me, I was forced to create a new one. And that new life turned out to be better, more authentic, and more fulfilling than anything I had before. Most importantly, I learned the power of self-respect and self-advocacy. For too many years, I had defined myself through my relationships with others as a mother, grandmother, caretaker, and provider. When those relationships turned toxic, I could have allowed them to destroy me. Instead, I chose to value myself enough to fight back, to demand better, and to build a life based on my own worth rather than other people's approval. To anyone reading this who might be facing similar betrayal or abuse, I want you to know you are stronger than you think you deserve, better than what they're giving you, and it's never too late to choose yourself. Don't let anyone, family, or otherwise convince you that you're powerless, worthless, or crazy. Trust your instincts, document everything, seek help from professionals, and remember that real love never involves manipulation, theft, or cruelty. Your life belongs to you. Your dignity belongs to you. Your future belongs to you. Don't let anyone steal those things from you, and don't be afraid to fight back when they try. As I write these final words, sitting in my sunny library, overlooking the James River, on this beautiful spring morning, watching Emma push her 6-month-old son, Michael Jr., in his stroller along the riverside path, while she tells him stories about his great-grandfather Robert, I am filled with profound gratitude. Not gratitude for the betrayal I experienced that was genuinely traumatic and painful, but gratitude for the strength I discovered in myself to overcome it. Gratitude for the opportunity to help other people facing similar situations. Gratitude for the genuine relationships I've built based on mutual respect and affection. And gratitude for the chance to live authentically on my own terms for the first time in my adult life. The note that Dr. Sullivan slipped me that day didn't just warn me of danger, it started me on a journey toward a life I never could have imagined. A life where I am truly free, genuinely loved, and completely myself. And that, I believe, is the greatest victory of all.